here at FileMaker, and I'm your host for today's Product Roadmap Web Seminar. I'm here with Rick Kelman, Director of Product Management, who will walk you through what's being planned and developed in the next two releases of the FileMaker Platform. But before we get started, I have some brief housekeeping notes. For the best experience, we strongly recommend that you participate in this web seminar with at least a broadband connection. If you have any problems or require online assistance at any time, please contact LogMeIn technical support at 866-478-1805. Again, that number is 866-478-1805. During today's presentation, you'll have an opportunity to type in some questions. Let's talk about how to enter a question. First, you'll go to the control panel, click on the question section, enter your question, and click send. You may enter questions at any time during this web seminar, and we'll cover as many questions as time allows at the end. And now, it's my pleasure to hand the presentation off to Rick. Rick, take it away.
Thank you, Leslie. Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Kelman, the Director of Product Management here at FileMaker. And I'm here to give you a look at the direction that we're heading with the FileMaker platform by sharing our product roadmap. Now, we base the ongoing evolution of the FileMaker platform on a number of things: feature request, customer feedback, market research, and by keeping up on current and emerging technologies. And I'd like to share with you some of the key future investments we're making across the platform by taking a high-level look at our FileMaker product roadmap. First, a few caveats. What I'll be sharing is what is currently being developed, tested, or planned for the next release and the one beyond that. This roadmap communication is to provide you with guidance and insights into our plans around core FileMaker platform functionality that is planned for the next two releases. Now, of course, plans are subject to change, and we can make no guarantee that any given feature that I share with you today necessarily will ship. This is being shared for informational purposes only, not as a binding commitment, so please do not rely on this information solely for making purchasing or business decisions. And of course, the development, release, and timing of any products, features, or functionality remains at the sole discretion of FileMaker and is subject to change. I would like to talk a little bit about the time frame definitions for the roadmap. Essentially, they're in two specific areas. I'll be talking about next, and these are features that are currently planned for the next major release of the FileMaker platform. You'll notice these because most of them will have UI that I can share with you. And then we share beyond next, and these are features that are currently under development or consideration for a future release of the platform, but beyond the next release. Now, we categorize our roadmap into three primary areas: create, share, and integrate. And this is in alignment with our workplace innovation platform that we introduced at our 2018 developer conference in Dallas, Texas. And if you want to learn more about that, please visit our website where you can find information on that. And you see here a slide is a high-level view of the blueprint for the workplace innovation platform. And this is what we'll be spending most of the rest of the roadmap on going into further detail. So first, let's take a closer look at those items that fall into the create category. Now, there's a number of items that we're working on for the next release in this area as represented on this slide. So we'll dive in and take a closer look. The FileMaker import dialog is being redesigned with a focus on making it more approachable, especially for new to FileMaker customers, but these changes should also be appreciated by experienced developers as well. The redesigned import field mapping dialog makes it easier to map import source data to FileMaker fields. It supports type ahead rather than drag and drop for greater efficiency, and the ability to specify custom delimiters when importing certain file types. And this, of course, is a feature of FileMaker Pro Advanced. Now, here's a look at the new import UI, which uses a mix of graphics and text to help users choose the appropriate import action with a little bit more clarity for them. Here's a look at the UI for import field mapping. And then here you'll be able to set auto enter options on a per field basis. And so that's a quick look at some of the changes coming to the import dialog. Next, I want to move to another feature that we're referring to in this release as version comparison, and it will manifest as save a FileMaker file as XML. So I want to say a little bit more about that during this presentation. This is a continuation of the XML file representation foundation work, which we introduced in FileMaker 17 with our starter apps and add-on tables, which are generated by rendering XML. And this work is a part of a multiple release or a multi-release effort. So I'll talk about what's coming next, and we'll talk about what comes beyond that as well. For the next release, our focus will be on providing a full XML representation of a FileMaker file. The new XML will be exposed via a new option in the Tools menu, as seen here in the screenshot, and a new preview release script step that allows developers to save their custom apps as an XML representation. With this functionality, developers can use the XML files to more easily compare changes and updates that they've made to their FileMaker custom apps. Here's a look at the XML representation of the contacts file that was generated with the new command from the Tools menu. And here is a look at the Save a Copy as XML script step, which is a new script step, a preview beta script step that allows you to save .fmp12 files as an XML representation of your FileMaker file. Now, you can also choose to store the XML representation in a field or variable with the new render file as XML preview script step. And then here's an example of storing that XML representation in a field within a FileMaker app. Now, we're also introducing a couple of new calculation functions. The set recursion calculation function sets the maximum number of iterations for recursions and loops within an expression. The default limit is 50,000 iterations, but this limit can be lowered or raised using this function. Now, for those who aren't familiar with recursion, they get the current default 50,000 iteration behavior, which helps prevent accidental infinite recursions from locking a FileMaker file. And then associated closely with that is a new while calculation function that is essentially a loop function for calculations. And this should help reduce some of the need for recursive custom functions that developers use today to achieve this capability. In the next release, we're also introducing a number of file-based script steps. And you can create scripts that read, write, and manage external data files to support things like external logging and data export and custom formats, as an example. This would replace many of the file-based plugins that people use today. Examples are you can use the create data file script step that creates an empty, closed data file. That then it can be opened with the open data script step and add data to that file using the write to data file script step. And then you can read from that file using the read data from open data file. And so you can see here a number of additional script steps associated with this new capability. Also in the next release, script error logging, this will be will provide a new preview script step. Set error logging, which can be on or off. It'll be off by default. And when you set error logging on, if a step returns an error, the script will write to a log file on the client's machine in their documents folder. A single file named scripterrors.log is created on demand only when error logging is turned on and an error is encountered for the first time. So those are the features in the next release under the category of create. I want to talk a bit about what we're anticipating for the release beyond the next release. And we'll first start with custom app creation enhancements. This leverages the XML representation work that I just spoke to you about and allows developers to create their own custom add-ons. Also to remove add-ons with an undo command and apply any updates to add-ons with an update command. So essentially, this is being able to take that XML that you can render a .fmp12 file into and be able to turn that back into a .fmp file. And of course, that sets us up to build the foundation for what we're calling lightweight authoring. And that feature is expected to have a number of pieces to it. The first is dynamic layout objects for all of our clients. The ability to create dynamic layouts with objects that resize based on the size of a layout window, or anchored to an area of the layout as the window size changes. Also, starter apps in FileMaker Go and WebDirect that leverage the XML that we're building out, so that using either FileMaker Go or FileMaker WebDirect, you'll be able to access these add-on XML files, either generated by FileMaker or by third-party developers. One of the other things we're looking at is the ability to support JavaScript within FileMaker, leveraging our web viewer to directly call JavaScript from FileMaker scripts and vice versa. We're also looking at providing an easier and more discoverable way to zoom in and out of apps that are displayed within FileMaker Pro Advanced. And we will continue modernizing our Windows framework to keep up with latest Windows OS technology. So that is the category of create. Now we'll move on to the category of share, and this is actually the biggest category in this release. We'll cover FileMaker Cloud 1. We'll cover new FileMaker Cloud 2. There's a number of items that under the general category of deployment and administration that we're introducing, and we'll talk about mobility, security, and performance enhancements as well. So first, let's talk a bit about FileMaker Cloud 1 and FileMaker Cloud 2. Now, first of all, I'd like to briefly mention that FileMaker Cloud 1, that's our current in-market version of FileMaker Cloud, as it relates to the next release, will focus on platform parity by updating FileMaker Cloud to 1.18, and it will support the features that I'm sharing today for the next release. So those that have UI in this presentation, those will be supported in FileMaker Cloud 1.18. Now I'd like to talk in more detail about FileMaker Cloud 2. And first off, what is FileMaker Cloud 2? It's a new platform as a service-based cloud hosting platform for FileMaker clients. FileMaker Cloud 2 allows customers to purchase the FileMaker platform and directly from FileMaker Inc. And deploy immediately to the cloud instead of having to go to the AWS marketplace at Amazon as a vehicle to purchase, set up, and deploy. So you'll be able to do all of that directly now through FileMaker without having to go and become a customer of Amazon or have AWS services. So who is Cloud 2 for? Well, initially, the primary focus of Cloud 2 is for new to FileMaker customers, but it also includes developers, experienced developers as well, who will want to take advantage of the latest evolution of FileMaker Cloud. So while it's intended to be really easy to use for new customers who don't necessarily want to deploy server hardware or go to AWS, we also think our experienced developers are definitely going to be interested in this. So our rollout plans for this is that we will initially launch Cloud 2 in the US, and then expand to other regions like we did with Cloud 1 initially. We'll take the opportunity to include feature richness during the phased rollout. We had a lot of success with this with Cloud 1, and we're going to leverage the same model with Cloud 2. And then finally, when will Cloud 2 be available? At this point, FileMaker Cloud 2 will be available next year. I can't tell you exactly when at this point, but that's our intention. So now a little bit more details on the specifics of FileMaker Cloud 2. This is the new FileMaker Customer Console. This is a new web-based application for customers to manage FileMaker ID, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So they manage their FileMaker ID accounts. This is where they can set up and access groups, their hosted custom apps, their settings, and their software, FileMaker software subscription. And this is all available as part of FileMaker Cloud 2. We'll introduce a FileMaker ID to be used for user authentication. when we launch FileMaker Cloud 2. And FileMaker ID will initially be used for Cloud 2 only within the FileMaker platform. We'll also introduce a web-based customer console that you see here, and that will provide a centralized location for a company to access all of their deployed assets for their company or organization. And it will also include the capability to set up licensed users, groups, as well as the ability to initiate any FileMaker Cloud 2 service upgrades or enhancements. Now, multiple companies can be expressed within a single console based on a specific FileMaker ID. So for an example, a FileMaker developer, an FBA member, could assist in managing multiple companies through a single console, or one company could manage multiple different departments who've purchased licenses separately because they're associated with specific FileMaker IDs. In this next release, we've also taken the opportunity to tightly integrate all of our software, FileMaker Pro Advanced, FileMaker Go, and FileMaker WebDirect with Cloud 2. So you see here under the file sharing menu, there'll be an upload to host. Users can use this dialog to upload custom apps to their Cloud 1.18, to FileMaker Cloud 2, as well as FileMaker Server. And it supports the ability to upload multiple files at once. And the redesigned dialog box also provides a more streamlined user experience. Next, I want to talk about some of the enhancements we're making in the area of deployment and administration. First, I'll talk about the FileMaker Admin API and its standardization. The goal here is to refine our existing FileMaker Admin APIs to better conform to RESTful API standards, and that is the Open API specification. The FileMaker Admin API, when we ship next, will no longer be a trial feature like it currently is with FileMaker Server and FileMaker Cloud. And you need to note that the trial period for the FileMaker Admin API that's part of FileMaker 17, the in-market product right now, will expire on September 27th of 2019. After that, it will cease to operate. Some additional enhancements to the product in the next release. You can use the assisted install text file to be able to specify a specific FileMaker custom app to launch when first launching FileMaker Pro Advanced. This is similar to what is typically done with opener files, but now you can directly do that by launching the icon. Also, using the new FileMaker ID, you have improved app access for FileMaker Cloud 2. With your FileMaker ID associated with your deployed apps, you can see all of the apps through the My App window that are associated with your ID, and this will replace the need for many launcher files. It does require FileMaker ID, and as I said, initially it is part of FileMaker Cloud 2 only. Another new enhancement for FileMaker Server in the next release is startup restoration. Now, this introduces a startup or a restoration log, which will log all change operations on disk. And this feature is to help ensure that FileMaker data file recoverability in the event that a FileMaker server fails or shuts down in an unexpected way. FileMaker Server will validate database entries when a file is first opened before the clients access the file. And if the file has not been properly closed, the restoration log helps the FileMaker files to be more recoverable after a hardware or software crash or failure. At FileMaker Server startup time, FileMaker will go through the restoration log to restore data files to a consistent state as if the database engine had been gracefully shut down. Recovery using the restoration log helps make sure that the data file corruption is resolved and transaction orders are intact. And the startup restoration feature will be enabled for FileMaker Server hosted files only. So this feature will be configurable through the FileMaker Admin API. You see here an example of the syntax to use for the FileMaker Admin API to turn on the startup restoration. There's two settings. One is to enable the startup restoration, and the second is to start the startup restoration log path, which will provide both of those set up through the Admin API. The startup restoration log path is the path name of the directory where the restoration log will be created. Next, I'll talk about some enhancements that we're making to the server admin console itself. There's a few examples here. There's many more here, but these are the ones that will stand out the most to this audience. The first is to be able to change the default backup using the command line interface. The second is to view script schedule, success or failure directly in the admin console. We'll provide clear iconography for an indication of a database status while in the admin console if it's opened, paused, closed, or it's in progress. And we'll show when the admin server was last started within the console as well. Next, talking about server monitoring enhancements in the next release, we'll provide an improved ability to monitor server resources and metrics using a third-party tool that's very popular among server administrators. It's known as Zabbix. And you're able to monitor multiple servers at the same time. It'll be available for FileMaker Server and Cloud 2. And we will provide documentation that will include scripts to be able to download Zabbix. Now, here's a look at the UI of Zabbix for monitoring the server resources as an example of the kinds of things that you'll be able to monitor or what it'll look like. Next, we'll move on to some enhancements we're making in the next release with regards to mobility. And the first is with FileMaker Go to support append to an existing PDF. And this feature provides parity with our append to PDF functionality in FileMaker Pro Advanced. And with this feature, you'll be able to append additional data to the specified PDF file on FileMaker Go. This functionality will be achieved by using a script step within FileMaker Pro Advanced to set it up. There's no need for any new UI in FileMaker Go associated with this feature. Once it's set up, it will just work. Now, we're also making some enhancements to our barcode support. So we will be supporting in the next release PDF 417, ITF-14, Aztec, and Data Matrix. And these new barcode types will appear in the barcode options dialog of the insert from device script step in FileMaker Pro Advanced as shown here. Next, I want to talk about some of the enhancements we're making in the area of security in the next release. We're making enhancements to the managed security dialog. Again, here we're striving to make this key dialog more intuitive to new FileMaker developers, while at the same time more powerful for our experienced developers. There will no longer be a basic and detailed view for managed security. We've merged both into a single dialog. Privilege sets, extended privileges, and file access will be accessible via the advanced options button you see on the bottom left here. There will also be a new privilege set that allows a user to access managed security, but not give them full access to any other parts of the file. And we'll be introducing the new FileMaker ID option in this dialog as well to create account entries. This will initially be associated with FileMaker Cloud 2 only, and you'll be able to see all of your FileMaker ID-based groups, and we'll talk about groups in a moment, directly from within the Managed Security dialog. Now, the new Managed Security dialog UI allows for selection of privilege sets directly in the main window via a pop-up menu. And clicking on any of the rows in the dialog automatically reveals the options panel you see here on the right. Now, moving on to FileMaker ID, I'd like to talk a bit about this feature. The first is that it acts as an identity provider system. This is an integrated sign-on system for authenticating users for FileMaker products and services. Initially, this will be available with FileMaker Cloud 2. Best way to think about this is if you use Active Directory for Windows, it has very similar capability. It's a decentralized management or centralized management of access to your FileMaker assets. Here's a screenshot for signing in with your FileMaker ID. FileMaker Cloud 2 customers create an ID, and then they use it to sign in to their FileMaker Cloud 2 deployment. FileMaker ID users, it's a customer who has a FileMaker ID account. They can use it to log in to their FileMaker Cloud 2 customer console to access all of their deployed apps and services associated with their FileMaker ID. And here's a screenshot of the UI for creating a FileMaker ID. Now, the first user and the admin by default will automatically be specified when FileMaker Cloud 2 is purchased and set up, allowing only that licensed FileMaker ID user to access the services and software. The initial admin can then invite other users to access their FileMaker Cloud deployment by sending an invitation, which requires those invited users to log in with or create their own FileMaker ID. And it's worth noting that the initial admin can also invite someone else to be an admin and then remove that role from themselves if desired. Licensed users are not locked into a single device by using FMID. They can sign on as a user using any of our products in the platform. That's FileMaker Pro, Go, and WebDirect. Regardless if it's on a laptop, a desktop computer, an iPhone, or an iPad, they can use and access it as many times as they need because they're a FileMaker ID user. You may invite up to the number of licensed users that your subscription specifies. So if you buy 5 users, you can invite 5 people and with FileMaker IDs to access. If you have 10 or if you have 100, those are the number of users that FileMaker ID will support in your FileMaker Cloud 2 deployment. Here's a screenshot that shows the UI for inviting new users to your FileMaker Cloud 2 deployment. And here's a screenshot that shows the UI for viewing and managing your licensed users from within your FileMaker admin console. And licensed users can be organized by being associated with groups. And multiple groups can be created, for example, setting up separate finance operations and marketing groups within a single organization. And a user can be associated with one or more groups. Group management is key for setting permissions and controls, which allow licensed users with FileMaker IDs to only access the FileMaker Cloud 2 deployed resources that the admin has specified through this user interface. Here's a screenshot that shows the UI for creating and managing groups. And also the FileMaker Customer Console, which is presented to licensed users with FileMaker IDs who log into FileMaker Cloud 2. It allows them to easily access their FileMaker Cloud 2 deployed apps and the software that are associated with their subscription, be that FileMaker Pro Advanced, FileMaker Go, or WebDirect. And the console also allows those named users to download any software they are entitled to based on the license that is associated with their account. So it's really easy to deploy that software out to those users who have access to your cloud too. Next, we'll move on to an enhancement we're making to plugin architecture for security within the plugin SDK. Will now enable developers to digitally sign their plugins. And notifications will warn users before loading an unsigned plugin, and you will be able to accept that, but you'll be notified if the developer has not signed their plugin. We're also making changes to the default file access protection. For one file to reference another file, require full access to use references to another file is enabled by default in the next release for newly created files. So this now will be secure by default. So rather than knowing you have to go in and tick this on if you don't want others to access the files, this will be the default behavior going forward. We will support OAuth 2.0 for iOS App SDK. It's something that we've gotten a number of requests for. Now we'll move on to performance and scalability enhancements for the next release. The first one is database engine improvements we're making for the next version of FileMaker Server. And essentially, we're moving away from essentially a serial queuing up of queries to be able to support parallel queries at the same time. So therefore, if you have a beefy server machine with a number of CPUs, we will optimally use those CPUs. There'll be parallel execution of queries, which should result in faster response time and less wait time. So that's a significant enhancement to the performance of FileMaker Server going forward. So that's in the next release. There's a number of items under the category of share that we're looking at for the release following that. The first is to create new on FileMaker Cloud 2. So rather than having to create a file on your local desktop or laptop and then upload that to the cloud, you can directly create it there on the Cloud 2 host. A FileMaker ID integration with Cloud 2 will continue to improve the workflow and the share when you're deploying custom apps to make it as streamlined and user-friendly as possible for FileMaker ID users. We will merge much of the Cloud 1 functionality into Cloud 2 and continue to aggressively make investments in developing FileMaker Cloud 2 platform, as well as rolling out the Cloud 2 to additional geographic regions throughout the year once we launch. Also, we're looking at adding card support for FileMaker WebDirect. This is one of the most common feature requests we have for FileMaker WebDirect. We'll try to knock that off in the next release. We'll continue to make database engine improvements. We'll continue development of the startup restoration feature and continue to build that out and make it more robust and powerful. We'll update the communication protocol on FileMaker Server to allow it to continually scale the performance of FileMaker Server. We'd like to bring FileMaker ID to support our on-premise software, not just FileMaker Cloud 2. We will continue to try to make it easier to apply SSL certificates to your deployments, making it as easy as possible. Also, we'll continue to make enhancements to our data API. We'll move to support for HTTP 2.0 protocol that will help scale performance of our data API, and that should also help scale performance of FileMaker WebDirect. And finally, let's move on to the last category of our roadmap, which is integrate. And there's a number of things that we're working on for the next release, so I'll dive in there. Now, we are continuing to build out and refine our data API. And to achieve parity with our PHP and XML metadata support, including script names, layout names, and layout schemas, our data API will now support metadata in the next release. And with this, we essentially complete our work to achieve parity with our PHP and XML web publishing APIs. Next, let's talk about REST-based connector enhancements. And this supports the ability for end users to create FileMaker data API connections to other web apps and services using a third-party tool known as Zapier. Now, while the FileMaker data API is a great integration tool for our developers, someone still needs to code the integration process to link FileMaker to an external system. And for a certain subset of our customers, the FileMaker data API is too technical of a solution, so we're working on a more user-friendly method to perform this integration. We'll be providing integration between FileMaker Cloud 2 initially and other third-party cloud apps and services which provide RESTful APIs. Example of these would be Microsoft Office 365, QuickBooks, Google Docs, etc. We'll do that using Zapier. Now, we'll provide the hooks to Zapier integration services specifically for FileMaker, allowing customers to much more easily integrate FileMaker with other third-party REST-based apps and services. Zapier currently provides what they call zaps to over 1,000 apps and services. So it's a quite robust and complete integration service. Here's an example of what the UI on the Zapier side looks like for connecting to our data API. And then here's the simple UI to make those connections. It's providing a bit of information, and then those connections between those two RESTful-based services can be made. Next, also, we're bringing support for OData to FileMaker Cloud 2 in the next release. This allows OData-capable client applications to query and update FileMaker data. OData is a REST-based open data protocol. Initially, it will be available for Cloud 2 only. This API supports batches, transactions, metadata, and operations and deletions of tables. It has performance advantages through the use of reduced inter-process communication and connection pooling. It will be based on FileMaker tables rather than layouts, so no layouts required in order to interact with the FileMaker data. And no additional software is required to be installed on the client, such as drivers, to interact with the API. It's completely REST-based and driverless. Next, I'd like to talk about Tableau server support in the next release. In addition to Tableau Desktop, which we currently support, the Tableau Web Data Connector will support Tableau Server. Again, this will initially be available as part of FileMaker Cloud 2 only. Now, FileMaker Shipping Tableau Connector only supports Tableau Desktop because of the requirement to display UI to request login credentials from the user. Tableau Server does not provide a UI to support these connectors, so our new Tableau connector will be updated so that it can run without needing a UI. Support for no UI mode will allow Tableau Server users to refresh their Tableau workbook data from FileMaker Server without having to overtly ask for that. Our support will address all forms of Tableau Server. They're on-premise, they're customer-hosted, and Tableau Cloud. And in all cases, the user must install our Tableau connector on the Tableau Server. For Tableau Cloud, customers need to run a local Tableau Server instance to proxy the data to Tableau Cloud. So that is in the next release. I want to talk a little bit about what we have in store for integration and the release beyond that. We'd like to bring that OData support that I just mentioned in FileMaker Cloud 2 to our on-premise software and FileMaker Server as well. We're looking at support for microservices so that we can leverage those within the FileMaker platform. Initially, we'll support AWS Lambda functions to more securely integrate external functions into FileMaker custom apps. And this will be an alternative to our existing plugin API architecture and especially suitable for our cloud deployments. We will make enhancements to our data API, continuing to add functionality to the data API as we build out our integration platform as a service framework. Also, we'll make enhancements to FileMaker Go integration. We're investigating leveraging Apple's core ML that they have right on the iOS devices and that framework to build into iOS or FileMaker Go, iOS App SDK apps, the ability to integrate machine learning models, such as the ability to do image analysis or natural language processing in FileMaker Go or with iOS App SDK. And we'll also continue to explore integrating emerging technologies that are coming down the pike, such as the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain for security within the FileMaker platform. Now, there's some other items I'd like to bring to your attention with the roadmap as well, and let's start with talking about deprecations. And first, I'd like to announce is, as of our presentation, we will be deprecating peer-to-peer sharing with FileMaker Pro Advanced. So we're deprecating that. We are not removing it in the next release, but it is being deprecated. We recommend that it be used for testing purposes only. The current in-market product and the UI when you set up peer-to-peer sharing already indicates that. If you don't want to set up a server and you just have those small needs that people use peer-to-peer for, we're going to recommend that those people move to Cloud 2 as a secure alternative. And the sharing connection limit will remain the same as it is today, which is at 5. We're also going to, as we ship the next release, no longer have a Swedish language version of FileMaker Server. We will still have all the clients localized in Swedish. And also, we will be adding a Spanish language support for FileMaker Server. And we will be dropping support for Mac OS Sierra 10.12. Now, it is worth pointing out a little bit more about what deprecations mean. And it doesn't mean the immediate deletion of an API or technology. However, what FileMaker Inc. is recommending is that you migrate your custom apps to use other APIs or technologies or alternative features of the product because the deprecated interface may be deleted in the future version of our applications. And also, I'd like to point out, while we did deprecate the royalty-free runtime capability of FileMaker Pro Advanced all the way back in FileMaker 14, it will not be removed in the next release. Beyond that, we have not yet determined, so the runtime will still be a part of the next release. Now, I want to say a bit more about FileMaker Cloud 1, especially with the advent of FileMaker Cloud 2. First of all, I want to go on record saying that the future of FileMaker Cloud will ultimately be FileMaker Cloud 2. The plan is to eventually merge most of the FileMaker Cloud 1 functionality into Cloud 2 and then discontinue Cloud 1. However, along with our launch of FileMaker Cloud 2 next year, we'll also release a FileMaker Cloud 1.18 version that will still be available through the Amazon AWS Marketplace. As of January 1st of 2019, Cloud BYOL, or Bring Your Own License, will be only offered in one-year license deals, so no multi-year deals. And the same with the Komodo SSL certificates. Those will only be available in one-year purchase blocks. We will also have a FileMaker Cloud 1.19 that will be available through Amazon Marketplace, the AWS Marketplace, but this will be our last version of our Cloud 1.x series. The support for Cloud 1.19 will end on January 1st of 2022, so that's pretty fair notice at this point. I want to talk about something else that we're referring to as FileMaker Marketplace. This is a new website initiative that helps present compelling listings of FBA products and FileMaker resources for customers to be able to discover and explore and ultimately purchase. The goal is to reflect current FileMaker positioning, the fact that we have a vibrant ecosystem, to provide a mobile-friendly website, and also support future in-product initiatives. New product requirement and listing guidelines that help FBA partners make the most of these product listings will be provided. This will replace our current made-for FileMaker web pages. The first version of this will not include e-commerce, and we're targeting December of this year for a public beta of the listing submission form pending a successful security audit of this new page. Next, I want to talk about the operating systems that are supported in the next release. Starting with FileMaker Pro Advanced, on the Mac side, we will support Mac OS High Sierra 10.13, as well as Mojave 10.14. On the Windows side, it's Windows 10 Enterprise and Pro Editions, Windows 8.1 Standard and Pro Editions, and Windows 7 Service Pack 1 Professional and Ultimate Editions. For FileMaker Server on the Mac side, it is also High Sierra 10.13 and Mojave 10.14. Windows is Windows Server 2016 Standard Edition and Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard Edition. For FileMaker Go, we'll support iOS 12.1 and iOS 13 when it becomes available. And then finally, for FileMaker WebDirect, for desktop browsers, we support Safari, Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, and Chrome. And for mobile browsers, we support Mobile Safari on iOS 12.1 as a minimum and Chrome on Android 7. Next, I want to talk about product availability. And first of all, what is product availability? Well, that is the ability to purchase, to receive technical support, to get replacement media, to get downgrade media, and downgrade license keys. So you can see the dates that we have either end of life our products or we intend to. So you can see that on September 21st of this year in 2018, the end of life of FileMaker 14 was announced. And then you can see that FileMaker 15, the end of life will be September 20th of 2019, and so on. Then you also see FileMaker Go as well listed there. And one thing I'd like to point out about FileMaker Go is due to iOS compatibility or security issues, FileMaker Go may be removed from the App Store earlier than scheduled here, but if none of those arise, then you can see those dates for when we plan on removing those. And of course, we would add additional future versions as well. So after reviewing this roadmap webinar, if you'd like to add a feature request, you can go to the URL that you see here. Or easier, just go directly within FileMaker Go, or excuse me, FileMaker Pro or FileMaker Pro Advanced, the help menu, and select FileMaker, provide FileMaker feedback, and it will take you directly to this URL. Also, you can go to the FileMaker community, the product ideas section, where you can enter your request or vote on other community members' requests. And what you need to know is both of these methods are actively reviewed by product management on a daily basis. So this does get to my team and myself. We will be posting this roadmap recording for this webinar to the community. And we will update this page if changes dictate that. And at this point, I'd like to hand it back to Leslie for some final.
Thanks, Rick. You certainly covered a lot of information in a very, very short period of time. For those of you listening today, if you missed parts of this presentation, we'll be posting a recording of this web seminar on Thursday in the community. Also in the community will be a product roadmap document that lists all the features Rick just covered. Next, I'd like to talk about the FileMaker Developer Conference. As you know, FileMaker DevCon 2019 will be held near Orlando, Florida at the Gaylord Palms Resort. The conference will take place August 5th through 8th, so be sure to save the date. Conference and hotel registration will open during the first quarter of 2019. All right, now it's time to start answering your questions. Just a quick reminder about how to ask a question. Go to the control panel, click on the questions section, enter your question, and click send. Rick, what's our first question?
Okay, well, thank you, Leslie. First of all, I've got plenty of questions here, so we will go up until the top of the hour. With those plenty of questions, I've got to tell you that a huge percentage of them are feature requests. And essentially what I'll say about that is I just shared with you the features that are intended to be in the very next release and an idea of the kinds of things we're looking at for the release beyond that. So it does cover that. So I get that there's many things people want us to do in the platform. There are avenues to go directly to product management that I just mentioned a little bit earlier. So I'm not going to spend time talking about feature requests, but rather talking about the things related to the roadmap we just presented. There's a question here, is when will FileMaker Server 17 be Mojave compatible? So good question. First thing I'll say about that is make sure you go to our knowledge base and look at what is not compatible. It's mainly around custom web publishing. Server in and of itself, if you're not using custom web publishing, should for the most part be fine running on Mojave. That being said, we do plan to push out an update for compatibility issues at the very beginning of December. That's our current plan. I can't give you an exact date, but early in December. Here's a question of how long the Mac platform will be supported by FileMaker Server. So we don't have any plans to end of life FileMaker Server on Mac OS at that time. So it's a hard question to answer because we don't have any plans to end of life that. Here's the question we get just about every presentation that the product managers do, and this is, when will FileMaker Go for Android be available? We don't have any plans to create a FileMaker Go version for Android. We do get that there are a lot of customers out there that use Android and not iOS devices, but for a number of reasons, that is not something that we are pursuing, but we absolutely understand the demand. That's what I'll say about that. There's another question, are there any plans to restore the standby server option? So not that particular implementation and not within the time frame of this roadmap, which is the next 2 releases. However, we're absolutely aware of the desire to have this sort of capability, but nothing to announce at this time. There's a question about why save a copy as XML and not save a copy as JSON. Well, fundamentally, the vast majority of what's going on underneath in FileMaker is based on XML. So it's a technology that we're already heavily leveraging. And it's, for instance, that's what we use to generate our DDR if you're not saving it as HTML. So we decided to leverage that because FileMaker already is versed in that language at the level of specificity that we need, because we're creating UI, we're creating relationships, we're creating calculations and scripts and so on, and we needed something very rich, and we wanted to base it on something that we could already leverage. Here's another question. It was, will JavaScript support in Beyond Next work in WebDirect? So it's a bit early to know for sure. There are certain limitations in a web browser regarding that, but it is our intent, if it's at all possible, to support it across all the clients, which would mean FileMaker Pro Advanced, FileMaker Go, and FileMaker WebDirect. So stay tuned on that, but that is in the release after next. Here's another question. Anything that helps us developers interface with APIs and make it easier to make smarter, more automated apps will be appreciated. Think Zapier or If This Then That for iOS. And so we got this question before. I did talk about Zapier. We are definitely focusing on and investing in making it easier to take advantage of the RESTful APIs to make the connections. That's why Zapier is one of the first that we went after. There will be others. You did hear me talk about integration platform as a service. That is a subset of the FileMaker platform that is sort of on the integrate side. And there's a lot of stuff to integrate with, and we think that that is certainly something that is going to be more and more important in the future for the FileMaker platform and ecosystem, especially as we move into some of the emerging and converging technologies like IoT, in artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain for security, and so on. A lot of these are leveraged by RESTful APIs. Another question here is, will FileMaker Cloud 2 be available in China? And if so, will that be during 2019? So at this point, our plan for Cloud 2 is to eventually roll it out worldwide in all of the regions that we currently support in Cloud 1, which currently does not include China. However, we are actively looking at getting into the China market. I have nothing specific to talk about. It's a very different market, a very different way of having to do business there, but it is something that we are looking at, and I don't think it would be in the 2019 timeframe, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for the future, but beyond 2019. Another question, will it be possible to upload and replace previously uploaded files from FileMaker Pro Advanced? Upload, absolutely. Through FileMaker Pro Advanced, you can upload to FileMaker Server, to Cloud 1, as well as Cloud 2. As far as replace, that's not something that is handled through that. We're not going to overwrite the file through that UI. What is the plan to handle apps built with the V17 API when it expires on September 27th? Will a new API be offered? So this is similar to the data API was in trial mode initially. For the admin API, and this is what this question is referring to, that went in the last release as a trial. The reason that we're changing it, and yes, it will be available as a shipping part of the reason it will not be a trial, is that we wanted to make sure that we are standardizing across our server and clouds. With that API, there were some differences there. They were created at different times. So we wanted to make sure that we were standardizing them so you don't have to learn different syntax if you're using the cloud versus the platform. So that's the primary reason it went into trial. The reason it went into trials, we wanted people to get experience with using it, but also to understand that the syntax will change, very similar to what we did with our data API. And so we didn't want to have people completely retool everything, but wanted them to have the year to get familiar with it. Next question is AWS and FileMaker. This setup is extremely cumbersome. Please do something about making this ultra easy to do. So essentially, that is exactly what Cloud 2 is. So with FileMaker Cloud 2, if I wasn't clear, it completely removes the necessity of having to go through the Amazon Marketplace, having to set up an account with Amazon, having to pay a separate bill to Amazon and FileMaker. It's 100% contained through the FileMaker Inc. Store and onboarding. So it is gives us complete control over the user interface, something that we weren't able to do with the Amazon Marketplace, and it will be a much easier way to deploy the cloud. Behind the scenes, it is absolutely still leveraging Amazon AWS Web Services. There's a question here, will there be a built-in audit trail function on server? So I did talk about startup restoration, which is the beginning part of us building out that capability further and further. I don't have anything specific to announce in this regard, but it is definitely something that we're looking at and we're aware of the desire for. There's another question, is access managed security without accessing other parts of the file? Please elaborate. So what I was saying here is you can give someone the ability to set up and add accounts and manage security without having to give them full access to everything else, to be able to change the schema and so on. So it's just a way of essentially authorizing someone that you don't want to have complete control over your entire custom app, but you do want to deputize them to, for instance, set up new accounts and so on. Another question is FileMaker ID a single sign-on if there's or multiple files on FileMaker Cloud? And that is the intent of this feature. So for all intents and purposes, it will act as a single sign-on system once you've logged in with FileMaker ID. There will be some timeout thresholds and that sort of thing. It will store it in your browser, but yes, it gets us a long ways towards that. Another question is that it looks like Cloud 2 plus FileMaker ID is a way for FBA members to create products and sell as a subscription. Is this correct? So I think you're astute. This is something that we are interested in. If you think about the FileMaker platform and our cloud for deployment, this is technically platform as a service. If an FBA member were to create, for example, a vertical product, an SBA product, for example, then and host that, that's software as a service. And that's definitely something that we're interested in the future of making possible. Will a developer be included in the user count for a user ID deployed development? Yes, initially that will. I think that as we get feedback, once we deploy Cloud 2, we may figure out how to accommodate that. Obviously, get what you're getting at here is, as a developer assisting a customer and having access to your FileMaker ID to their deployment, you don't really want to count against their subscription. So we absolutely understand that. Another question is there an end-of-life version for custom web publishing in XML? And this question probably comes because I talked about that we're just about to achieve parity with our data API, with our PHP and XML APIs with the metadata support. So at this point, we haven't deprecated it. We don't really have an idea of end of life. Once we do, we'd probably initially keep XML and we'd probably retire the PHP for our JSON and REST-based data API. We got time here for one more question. So let me, there's a slew of questions related to wanting some of these new features and capabilities that are only part of Cloud 2 for the on-premise deployments as well, using FileMaker Server, obviously. And that is our intent for the most part. Now, we'll bring these initially to Cloud 2, but our intent is to bring those across the platform. And then let me just one more second, and then this will be the last question. It says peer-to-peer sharing. Just want to be sure that you're saying that peer-to-peer will eventually be removed. And yes, it will eventually, but right now it's only being deprecated. Remember, we did deprecate the royalty-free runtime back in FileMaker 14. We have not removed it, but deprecation means we're not going to invest in it any longer, and we're giving you a long notice to please move away to other technologies or other features of the product. So we give a fair warning, but it is still going to be part of the next release, and we haven't made a decision when we'll remove it. That's all the time we have, and a few over. I really appreciate your time. I know that you're very busy people, and we appreciate your attention. And with that, I'd like to say